Anti-drone protesters, including 2 priests, fined for damaging an RAF base. We will continue to fight. The message from 6 protesters convicted of criminal damage at a Lincolnshire RAF base. Their target was unmanned aircraft known as drones being operated remotely over Afghanistan from RAF Waddington. The protesters claim that they're being used to kill civilians, something denied by the MOD. In a moment we'll hear from one of the campaigners, but first Jessica Lane has this report from Lincoln Magistrates Court.
Protests outside court as these 6 appeared charged with criminal damage after cutting through a perimeter fence at RAF Waddington.
We're actually at the beginning of our visits to RAF Waddington.
Each ordered to pay a total of £100, including £75 for the cost of the prosecution. But they still believe they were right to target the drones.
These issues will keep coming before the courts, and there will be ongoing legal initiatives and protests.
It would have been lovely to have had an acquittal. That's what I would have liked. An acquittal, and for the magistrate and everybody else in the court saying, let's go walk on Waddington.
Armed unmanned Reaper aircraft are playing an increasingly important part in modern warfare. Known as drones, the crews that operate them sit behind a computer screen thousands of miles away. They were operated at a US base by personnel from Lincolnshire. In October last year, a new squadron was formed to operate the aircraft from Waddington. That sparked several protests, including in April when hundreds of people marched to the base. In June, these 6 people were arrested for cutting through the perimeter fence. The 6 defendants say they've tried peaceful protests in the past, but that they weren't effective. They all admitted causing the damage by cutting the hole in the perimeter fence, but said it wasn't criminal. They argued they were trying to prevent a greater crime happening in Afghanistan. When operations began from Waddington, this is how one aviation expert defined their role.
They're fundamentally watching over British forces and their Afghan allies in Helmand province. They're not out to kill bad guys in the Yemen or Pakistan. This is supporting British troops and Afghan nation rebuilding.
The Ministry of Defence says the Reaper plays a vital role supporting military operations in Afghanistan. And commenting on today's prosecutions, it added, the MOD has a duty to maintain security at all defence installations and uses all lawful means to do so. Prosecutions for damage to MOD property are a civil police matter. The judge described the 6 defendants as delightful people and said he sentenced them with a heavy heart, but couldn't accept that they had a sufficient reason for damaging the fence. The protesters say they'll consider appealing the verdict. Jessica Lane, BBC Look North in Lincoln.
This evening I spoke to one of the protesters, the Reverend Keith Hebden. I asked him if committing criminal damage was a responsible way to behave.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we're not guilty, and we stand by that. I think the judge got as close as he could to acquitting us. He said he gave the verdict with a heavy heart, and that it was a legitimate protest and a legitimate target. So the judge started by saying that common sense wasn't where he was able to make a decision, but only according to law. So he felt he had to give us the conditional discharge and £10 compensation to the RAF as the least. But I think it's clear that we've been vindicated in our actions. There are people being killed, innocent people. Cutting a fence is nothing in comparison to
the MOD says, and I quote, I've got the statement here, it is undoubtedly helping to save the lives of our forces, our allies and Afghan civilians. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. Do you agree with the MOD?
I don't. If they really want to save the lives of forces, they can pull them out of Afghanistan. That would be a much more straightforward way. But in the meantime, we have good evidence on the ground in Afghanistan that the use of armed drones is creating new resentment to the UK and to the US and creating a more unstable world and more terror.
Are you not putting lives at risk by following your own agenda, which presumably is anti-war full stop?
All our lives are being put at risk by the use of armed drones, and we need to do something about that and have a
But that's not what the MOD is saying, are they? They say it quite clearly. They're wrong, are they?
Absolutely, they're absolutely wrong, and they need to face up to the consequences of what they're doing. And that's what we wanted to do when we went into RAF Waddington.
But given that war and fighting will always happen at times, even though you would rather it didn't, and we all would, wouldn't you rather those who are fighting for our country, there would be less risk to them?
Big assumption that they're fighting. I'm sure they would have been told they're fighting for our country. There's absolutely no evidence from our governments or from anyone that what they're fighting for is doing anything to benefit our country or to make the world a safer place. We've got no reason to be there, and what we're doing with armed drones is making the world a less safe place.
Reverend Hebden, good to talk to you tonight. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Peter.
On the subject of drones being operated from RAF Waddington, like your thoughts on this one? Are the protesters right to break the law to make their point, or do you think the government are right to use these unmanned aircraft? You've heard the views of the protesters and also the statement there and what the MOD say. Your thoughts on this one? Now, there's a very big response on the subject of drones after a discussion there with the protester. Mark says protesters should have been jailed for after taking a reality pill. They obviously think more about our enemies than our own troops. Pete says, thank goodness, Peter, that the group of protesters were prosecuted for a crime they committed on MOD land. No matter how delightful these people are, they cannot take it upon themselves to break the law. They set a bad example. How would they feel if I decided to enter their homes because I thought I had the right to do so? Ali says, on the subject of use of drones, I don't usually sit on the fence, but in this case I am. I understand why drones are being used, but I also see the point of the protesters. And this from Peter on email. He says, the vicar spoke a good deal of sense. The best way to protect our soldiers is to bring them home from places like Afghanistan. They are not fighting for our country. They are supporting a political agenda at tremendous expense to us. A very big response on this story. Thank you very much indeed for that.